Welcome to Not Just Ads, the show where B2B brands discover how creator-led content drives pipeline, builds trust, and grows long-term brand equity. Each episode, we speak with business leaders, founders, and creators who are defining their categories. I'm your host, Marcus Sherwin, and this is the creator economy for B2B. Great. Welcome to today's show. I'm delighted to be joined by Heather Barnett. Heather is a seasoned marketer. She's led a number of leading marketing roles at Marketing Practice. And more recently, over the last few years, she's started her own business in B2B copywriting. She's worked across sectors from tech to financial services to higher ed and helping brands not only to communicate clearly, but to connect emotionally using tone, rhythm, and even humour to cut through the noise. If anyone hasn't seen her videos yet on LinkedIn, I would advise you to go to her profile, look at the videos because they're hilarious. Heather, thanks very much for joining us on the show today.
Thanks for having me.
Great. So the videos I think are resonating with a lot of people because I think it's fair to say that B2B, and you might have mentioned it before, it's embarrassingly safe. Why do you think, what do you think the main reason is B2B brands are so risk averse to doing something out of the ordinary? Like there is research done, I think you mentioned it as well, by the team in System F in terms of being, it's costly being dull. Like you're kind of nearly wasting money in a sense of being consistently dull. But when you work with brands and clients that you have, what do you think is the big resistance that you come up with when, that they know, but they want to try and sell it internally? What's the big resistance in terms of doing something a little bit more bold that actually cuts through the noise?
Yeah. It's interesting, isn't it? Because I think people do know those figures about, it is a lot more expensive just to keep churning out the same old stuff because people don't see it, they don't remember it. So you have to put a lot more money behind it for it to hit than if you do something that stands out and they'll remember it straight away, or they'll see it and it'll stick in their mind. And it's that kind of, it's all the mental availability, the distinctiveness, all the things we talk about as marketers. So yeah, why is it that we know we should be doing that kind of stuff, but then we go into the office and we got to go, not today. I don't think I'll do that today. I think some of it is because you're in an organization that is set up to reduce risk. If you're in a business to business organization, it wants to protect its shareholders, it wants to maximize revenue, it wants to not get sued, all those things. It's kind of like the structures that are there to reduce risk. So if you're then going as a marketer and saying, can we do this thing that might be a little bit risky, but it might really pay off, then you're kind of fighting against the tide basically, because you're not in a structure that supports that. And I think often you're probably not led, I'm going to be a massive generalization now, but you're maybe not led by somebody who is open to creativity and experimentation as well, because maybe they've come up through the finance side or dare I say through the sales side. So, you don't have as many marketers perhaps at the top of B2B firms as you do at B2C firms. And I'm wildly generalizing here and I have nothing to back this up. It's just a sense I have from working at different companies.
The proof is in the copy, no? From the copy that you see. Yeah. And that's probably fair to say. Humor. So humor is one thing, and we can see it on your videos. We'll go into that in a few minutes. But what other things do you think, kind of emotions that can be evoked in B2B that can actually cut through the noise?
I think if you evoke any emotion in B2B, you probably are way ahead of the rest, to be honest. And it's thinking about, it is quite a complex thing because people will say, we must bring emotion to this advert. And sometimes I think they mean we must, make it a bit sad or something like that. And I don't think it is that. I think it's about evoking an emotion that is relevant to your brand and that stays with somebody later on. So I think honestly, just working from a baseline of so much stuff, it's got a long way to go before it thinks about the complexities of how and what emotion means in B2B marketing, because actually so much is just unread and unseen because it is jargon filled or it's generic or, it's focusing on what the internal customers at your organization want you to say rather than what you think the audience actually wants to hear. So there are so many things to tick off before you can actually get to a point of going, and now can we actually make this emotionally resonant and something that people will remember and that maybe even stands out in the whole of everything they see on a day-to-day basis, not just amongst B2B adverts, because that would be a great ambition to have, that it would be something that like some great B2C adverts that people will remember and they will watch over and above other entertainment. Wouldn't it be amazing if we could be aiming for something like that in B2B? But I think again, big generalization. I'm sure there are exceptions, but I think on the whole, we're quite a way off that. People are going to hate me for saying that.
No, I think it's fair to say. I think, but with that though, there's probably a lot of opportunity. I spoke to recently. We were speaking to different people on the show, and we had Chris Sheen from Celonis, and what he was saying was like, I was just asking him about their creative process in terms of like, they're a very B2B company, and if you kind of explain the features and what they do, it still sounds very B2B. So what they've done is they've come up with a podcast, and they've basically tried to like, and they've done it really well. They've looked at processes and certain things. So one example is like the Oktoberfest, and they look at the process of bringing beer into where Oktoberfest is and how that's done and how the process works, and then how that's tied into their business. So that's one approach that I thought was like, it's quite innovative to kind of with the story around it, and then you kind of like tie it into how that relates to their business and stuff. But it's challenging to do that if you're professional services and you're always trying to think of like, okay, how do we make like join this with like something that's engaging to the average person that does not have a clue what we do, and then also link our brand and our message as well.
Yeah, that is the job of the marketer and the copywriter, because you know, I'm not that familiar with professional services. I haven't done a lot of work for, but for a lot of, say, manufacturing or tech companies, you would look at it and from the outside you'd think, oh, this is quite dry. Like, why are people going to find this interesting? But if you go in there and you speak to subject matter experts who are the expert on something incredibly niche that nobody else knows anything about, because their company is probably one of the 3 companies in the world that does this thing. And you have a conversation with them and you suddenly think, this is amazing actually what they do. And it will be something behind something that we all recognize, perhaps, like, you know, your Oktoberfest example. It'll be something where you went, but do you know how they get this thing from here to here to here to here? And that's your job to then go in and go, this is what we can make into an amazing story. And those are the kind of nuggets that you have to look for and then work out how you can, you know, build the hook around it and make it engaging and entertaining and all that kind of stuff. But genuinely, I think there are very few companies where you couldn't find those stories if you really tried hard enough. I think people, you know, need to try hard to find the stories that are there that people will find engaging and entertaining. Yeah.
Do you think that there are some like companies that are kind of looking at that approach in terms of, are we still in the phase of like, no, we'll actually have a white paper and we're going to, is there any from clients and people that you talk with in the industry, can you see of any companies, maybe not using humor, but like other things where they're actually, they're engaging with their ICP in a way that's kind of consumable and that's relatable and so on?
Completely. No, I think people are trying to do that. And I think, you know, you'll see examples here and there of people who are genuinely, you know, I'm not kind of dissing marketers as a whole. I think this is what we all want to do. We get into this industry to try and be creative and, you know, to use our creative brains and to communicate. You know, we're trying to communicate all the time. And there are definitely, you know, there are clients I work with, there are other companies out there who are doing a good job of going, no, we're not just going to kind of like list out the product's features and, you know, just trot out the same old stuff. We are going to try and be a bit more creative about it, but it's maybe more sporadic than you might see in B2C or something. So it's not as easy to kind of point to a company and say, look at them, they're the kind of, you know, North Star of what we should all be doing.
Yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense. And I think as well, there's so many different verticals within the B2B space. It's difficult to say, okay, that's applicable to what we can do that. And it's challenging. Let's say you start working with clients and they're a very B2B traditional company. How do you approach that then? If you like have, okay, maybe we can go with this idea.
I often get involved quite early in the process. And that's how I like to get involved, so that I do get the chance to help kind of shape everything about the content piece. So in terms of like the angle and who we're going to speak to even at the company, in terms of like who might know about this, and then doing the interviews, so interviewing the subject matter experts and things like that. Because I think if you bring, depending on the type of copy you want and the type of copywriter you're working with, if you bring somebody in quite late in the process and you've kind of worked out what the proposition is for this set of products, or you've spoken to subject matter experts, you've taken some notes and then you hand it over, you probably won't get a great output because you've not allowed the copywriter to use their brain and think, no, but hang on, I think there's probably something a bit more interesting over here that we could look at. So I'll normally start from that process. Sure. It's very rare that I come into a company and they're like, oh, sorry, we didn't want any personality in this copy. So I don't normally have to push against that too much, but within the company, okay, I'm just trying to do straightforward, interesting, entertaining copy, but sometimes people will still push back with that kind of like, no, we need to stick a few more leverages and, you know, streamlines in here, please. Thanks very much. But on the whole, I think what you can do is just show people why you're doing what you're doing. So I had an example recently where I'm working with a client who has an SEO agency, and the SEO agency has said, oh, here's some examples of blogs we think you should write. And so one might be, what are the trends in big data?
Yeah.
Okay, that's a very big topic for a start. What our company does is a tiny fraction of that. And why would anyone expect us to have authority on that topic? Why would they read something from us versus somebody on someone else? So then I'll kind of go, but what we have done, because I often work with companies over quite a long period as well. So I know that you've done this report, which was actually some very interesting first party research that you've done, that we can then take this angle out of that and niche it down a lot to say,
Yeah.
we can still have the keywords that you want for your SEO, but let's make it, something that isn't already written about 20 million times elsewhere on the internet, and let's give it your particular flavor where you can add something new because you do actually have a point of view on it. Because I think
Yeah.
if people maybe that if they're not questioning enough, so they are getting kind of like, we should write this, it's just a tick list of like, we must write these blogs on these topics, and you can put it out there, nobody's going to read it because they could choose the same thing from Forrester or Forbes or whatever it is, instead. So why would they read your blog? So I think it's that kind of thing of trying to think not only what must we do in terms of like we must do this stuff, but actually, okay, fine, if we're going to do it, how can we make it more interesting how can we make it more interesting for us as well? Like, how can we make this a fun, interesting thing to work on rather than something that we're just churning out?
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. Now as well, like your video is very funny on this, actually, on thought leadership. That word has not been mentioned enough, I guess, across B2B. But what do you see like with people that are like doing thought leadership? And like we talk about creators here, and I know that can be a bit cringy as well when you hear the word, but I think the whole premise of the show is really to talk to people in B2B that have an interesting story or that are sharing interesting content. But when you look at like kind of every company now wants to be a thought leader, but what do you see of like some companies that you think actually they're kind of getting it right in terms of maybe it's authentic versus ones like we all know the ones that are getting it wrong, but do you see any examples in terms of like how they actually get it right when they come to thought leadership, for want of a better word?
I think, and this is interesting, I remember there was a little comment thread that was going on a LinkedIn post that Robin Hartley did, who's very good at personal brand, and she was talking about what makes a thought leader, and it made me think about the kind of spectrum that thought leaders are on, because I think if you think about the amount of people that actually have something really interesting, unusual or controversial to say, I think it's probably like a bell curve, and they're probably like there's a few at this end of the topic and there's a few at that end of the topic, but actually in the middle everyone else is saying something very similar.
Yeah.
So if you want to stand out there, then it's all to do with how you express it to me. So it's all to do with like, okay, you probably think similar, similar to 80% of us or whatever, but you have a very different background. So the two of us, you have a very different background to me. You've had different life experiences, you've had different career experiences. So if you can bring your angle on it, then it's going to be interesting because it's going to be different to mine. And if you can do that in a slightly more entertaining way than somebody else, or a more memorable way than somebody else, or a more digestible way than somebody else, I think there's all those nuances to kind of.
Yeah.
And what I suppose I'm saying is those people, everyone isn't a thought leader, are they? Probably those people at the end are thought leaders. The people in the middle, I don't know what they are. They're kind of like thought expressors.
Yeah.
but they're just expressing very similar thoughts to everyone else. But whether you want to read it or not depends on, it's like, having a favourite author or whatever. You like an author because you like their authorial voice. And it's very similar, I think, to some of the stuff you read on LinkedIn. I will read stuff from people, not because I think they're necessarily going to have a very different take on it, but I like the way they express themselves.
Yeah.
So I will look out for that. Whereas if somebody has done a kind of ChatGPT post of like, here's 5 takeaways on this, it's just like, no.
And it's very obvious as well. I think people are getting really sick of that, like kind of the effortless kind of like copy and paste from ChatGPT. Yeah, it's interesting because you're seeing like, especially with very traditional sectors. One example, I believe it's the president of BlackRock. I saw like he's sharing a lot of videos of himself running when he's on business trips. And I think if we're talking about this like 5 years ago, you'd never have like the president of a financial institution sharing videos like that. So it's definitely changing.
I want to see more CEOs on trampolines.
Yeah. But yeah, it's definitely changing. I guess it's like what you say. It's like how it looks more authentic. It's probably maybe it stands out a little bit more. And at the moment in B2B, that's something that's possible because there is a lot of similar kind of content. I'd love to get on to hearing a little bit about how the videos came about and also like kind of how that idea came about and how now that's kind of like impacting your overall business as well.
Yeah. So the videos came about, I suppose, because I was thinking about, I need to promote myself on LinkedIn. I'm a freelancer. My work comes, as I said, either from people who I already know, but even if I already know them, they need to be reminded, like any good marketing. It's like you want to be front of mind when they're thinking, oh, I need a copywriter. And I also wanted to, make sure that I got business potentially from new people via LinkedIn. So I started posting when I first went freelance about 3 years ago, and I tried lots of different things. And again, this is something I guess to think about, is that you don't necessarily find the thing that you're good at or that is
Sure.
going to work straight away.
Yeah.
It's like try a few things. And I had seen videos that, you know, people like Rob Mayhew were doing and thinking, oh, okay, that's working on
Yeah.
LinkedIn, because I'd done a few many years ago on Twitter for other reasons. That sounds odd, to promote a book that I'd written. So yeah, I had kind of dabbled in comedy before, but I was always a bit like many of us. I think I was thinking, oh, I don't know about LinkedIn though, because that's like, you know, I'm professional on LinkedIn. I can't possibly do that there. And then, yeah, you see someone like Rob and kind of think, oh, that's brilliant. And people love it because it is a bit different, but his is more agency focused. And I wasn't really seeing people doing a lot of B2B focus. So I tried a couple and they went really well. And I thought, great, okay, I'll just keep doing this. But what started as a traditional thing, I suppose, has taken on more of a life of its own, and has led to other opportunities where, you know, people have asked me to do videos for them, or they've asked me to come and perform at events and things like that. So it's not something that I had started out with a big plan that's where it was going to lead, but because I have always had that kind of slight kind of performance comedy interest, it's brilliant, and I genuinely really enjoy doing the videos as well, and I love it when it lands with people and they kind of say, oh my god, yes, you know, I recognize this.
Yeah. No, that's great. How do you find then, like in terms of as a business driver then, so like you're saying it enables you to be kind of front of mind for your clients. Do you find then like that you're getting business, like even from people that we call them lurkers on LinkedIn, is what basically somebody that doesn't comment or doesn't like your post, but then you get them on a call and they say, I actually saw your content. Yeah,
I've had quite a few of those, and it's always bizarre because it'll be someone who'll kind of like pop up and say, oh god, I love your videos, I really look forward to them. I'm like, I've never seen you before. Like, I have no idea who you are. You've never liked it. You've never commented on it. And it's just interesting, isn't it? So I think it's a good positive thing to know that even if you're putting stuff out there and maybe people aren't engaging that much with it, that they potentially still are enjoying it in the background, but for whatever reason they're not engaging with it. So yeah, I've had a lot of people come through off the back of those videos, and as I said earlier, in a way it's a bit like a good qualification thing for me, because if you don't like the humor, or you would rather kind of just do, you know, the kind of B2B jargon filled stuff that I'm taking the mickey out of, you wouldn't come to me. So that saves us both time.
No, it's really, in terms of time frame then, like how do you manage your week? Does it take a lot of time for you to kind of like get the concept of the video, produce it, film it, upload it to LinkedIn, or what way do you normally work that out? With running your business as well, obviously.
Yeah. So I suppose I come up with the video ideas in my spare time. So if I'm pootling around the house, I'm walking, I'm filling the dishwasher, whatever it is, I'm kind of thinking about something that I've seen on LinkedIn, or I'm thinking about a conversation I've had or something, and thinking, how can I turn that into a video? And then over a period of days, but again, without writing anything down at this point, I'm kind of crafting a script in my head. So I'm building bits onto it and whatever.
Sure.
So by the time I come to film it, I know exactly what I'm going to say. So the filming actually doesn't take long at all. If I'm lucky, I'll do it in 1 or 2 takes, depending on if my cat comes and makes a big noise outside, or the builders are working, or what, you know, whatever's going on. Like normally the filming is the shortest bit, and then I do have to do a bit of editing. You know, as anyone seeing the videos will know, I am not a proficient editor, but I will put captions on and I'll try and put some music on or whatever, and that probably takes me a lot longer than it should because I'm just very bad at it. But yeah, it doesn't take a lot of time. It's because I can fit it in around everything else that I'm doing, but I do 1 a week, and I think that's at the moment that's kind of enough for me. Yeah. But since doing that, then like you've noticed the impact on your business overall, no, in terms of like kind of people reaching out to you and so on. So, and I think as well, one of the stats that we saw recently on the platform, it's about 36% of video content is growing like year on year in terms of consumption as well on the platform. So it's definitely like the kind of the sweet spot on LinkedIn at the moment, where people are getting a lot of engagement and reach as well. Yeah. So in terms of B2B then, like from the companies that you're talking with, and you've launched the company about 3 years ago, have you seen any kind of like trends in terms of changing? Like we talked about thought leadership. You talked about like kind of that, yes, B2B is embarrassingly safe. Are there any kind of like trends that you've seen now that like, you know, actually in LinkedIn, they did some research last year calling it the B2B renaissance, like that companies were getting a little bit bolder. What do you see with the clients that you're talking with? Is there anything in terms of like maybe a fresher approach,
approach or something that they're leaning into more that probably 2 or 3 years ago you didn't see as much of?
I do actually think that humour is something that is becoming more accessible, maybe in B2B, and becoming more kind of considered. And some of that is due to what you see on LinkedIn, I think, because you are seeing more and more people doing funny stuff. And it may be, freelancers, or it may be kind of like outlier companies. But I think people are starting to go, oh, hang on, no, maybe this is okay, maybe this is something we can try. And I'm occasionally seeing B2B companies, doing some kind of campaigns or whatever that are funny. So I think, I think there's that. And I think, it's slightly aside from what you're saying, but I think the whole, it is kind of joined in with the influencer thing. So I think, because you are seeing more individual influencers being used in B2B, and some of those are funny content creators. So it's almost like the two things are coming together, where people are going, okay, maybe this is a way that we can use humor, is that our company isn't directly pushing something out, but we are sponsoring somebody who does it already. And so it's kind of like we're using their audience, but we're also using the fact that they make people laugh and they make people feel good, but it's a kind of safer way of doing it, because we're not kind of like coming out directly and putting funny stuff all over our digital billboards or whatever.
Especially, we had one of our guests recently, David Walsh, that's launched a platform connecting B2B brands with B2B creators, and it's grown significantly. Like, it's definitely a space that's growing a lot, that brands are seeing, like, why not, rather than just trying to get somebody internally or trying to build off, basically just work with a creator that has the established audience and get them to collaborate as well. Mentioned it at the start also, like, people avoid the risky things because it's risky and it may erode trust. Do you think humor could be a competitive advantage in terms of actually like maintaining trust with people?
I think you feel positive emotions towards someone who can make you laugh, because it's all to do with feeling understood. So it's there's a very similar line there between humor and observational humor and comedy, is that you're saying to someone, I see this, I feel the same way. In comedy, you're exaggerating it, and then you're making them laugh about it. In marketing, you're maybe also exaggerating it, but you're showing them how you can solve their problem. So I think if you feel like someone gets you, then you do feel like you trust them more. So however a company is doing that, whether it's humor or it's some other way, I think that can only help. And I do think the thing about risk is overstated, because if risk was like the spectrum, B2B is so far down the kind of safe bit of it anyway, you'd have to do a huge amount to kind of get a PR issue going on or whatever. And again, there's research, Jenny Romanek has looked at this, and the amount people worry a lot more about the negative impact of brand perception than they should, because actually people are much more likely to take nothing away from your brand than they are to take a negative perception away from your brand. So I would say I don't think the risk is always as great as people think it is. And certainly adding some humour in a sensible way can only help to make people kind of go, A, I remember you, and B, I'm more likely to consider you because you do seem to just be normal, nice people, rather than robots that write with too many jargon words.
What would you say to companies then if you went in and they were like, look, everyone is on board, but we want to get our message in terms of cutting through the noise. We don't want to use any jargon. What would you say, like, some steps to, like, either B2B scale-ups or even like big brand that want to do like a rebrand or something like that? Any kind of steps that you'd give them in terms of what they should do in approaching their copy?
So it's a lot simpler than you think. It's just think about how people speak and between each other, and think about how you speak and how you want the kind of stuff that you want to read, because that's what I think we put our brains aside when we start writing B2B copy. For some reason, we decide that we have to sound very professional, and we have to kind of make it sound very complex and why? It doesn't make any sense, other than trying to kind of say, don't worry, we're professional and we understand that things are very professional here. If you actually strip that all away and just think, let's just be very clear and straightforward and tell people what they want to hear, in terms of like, what do they want to understand about our company? What are their challenges they're trying to solve? How do they talk about it? It's more a case of simplifying things down than adding in process steps, I think, to get to that point.
Yeah. So keep it simple, really, and kind of relatable and simple, no? Yeah. Great. Heather, it was a pleasure having you on the show. Thanks very much for joining us. If people want to find you, obviously on LinkedIn, and you're also an author as well. You mentioned that, I heard on another podcast. You've authored a few books as well, right?
I've written a couple of rom-coms, yeah. So if you're a B2B who's also into rom-coms in that Venn diagram, then look me up.
Great. Well, listen, thanks very much for joining us. It was a pleasure to talk with you.
I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Cheers.